anybody can confirm me, they can see my screen, right?
Yes, I see the
Okay,
slide deck.
good. So good morning, good evening, everybody. So we are here on our 35th meeting, and let's go through the normals. This is where you do register if you haven't, and if you are in the meeting, want to be default attendee, just drop me your name and email on the chat, and I'll make sure that you don't have to register going forward. So before we begin with the questions and what we left last week, I just wanted to encourage everybody to join the BC webinar. If you, what is that? I guess Steve, is BC webinar or webinar, which happens 2
Birinar
weeks now. Yeah.
by Christoph.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So I was there last week. After a while, David was there, Steve was there, and it was a great discussion about um, how you bring new people. I like idea from David that we should have some universities which or training institutes where we can train these people so that they are ready for BC. And then I had a thought that how can we even judge how better we are in NAV or BC as an individually? And that's super interesting to think because in NAV word, I would have said that, okay, I'm a junior dev, more or less. But now, how much we know about BC and, because things are changing super fast. And I guess I learned last week also that Microsoft is also changing certification. Like in the past, once you are certified for a particular exam, then that remains active till, till the end of the time. But now with these business central certification, I guess they have a life of a year now. So if you kind of pass that exam this year, then it is valid for one more year, and then you'll have to reappear. And I guess the reason behind it is because the product is also changing so fast. So you can't just say that I was, certified with Business Central 2021 Wave 1, and I'm certified as a functional consultant. So that's interesting how things are changing and how we need to keep on learning new things and keep up with what's coming up in the product. Any thoughts, anybody? Oh,
I guess
yeah.
being new to all this, I would agree it's a ton of learning. But it seems that the long-time NAV people have, I've seen several of them become certified from the functional exam. And it apparently isn't too hard, but for the new people, that certification exam is apparently rather challenging.
Yeah,
But I can't imagine having to do that every year. That seems like overboard to me, but
I guess it's, yeah, as far as I heard about it, it's the way Microsoft is planning it is once you're registered as in certified, then next year, I guess there is no fees. I'm not sure about it. I just overheard it
okay.
somewhere. You can attempt, I guess, twice next year for free if if you want to regain your certification.
Right.
But let's see how that goes. I just overheard some conversation last week somewhere.
And is there, have you heard anything about a technical or development certification?
They're working on it.
Okay. I heard a
I
rumor,
heard,
but I don't know
right.
if it's real.
Right. Okay, so let's move ahead with the questions. And before we start where we left last time, the one thing that came as a question, and the person is not here, but also this also came a little bit in yesterday discussion about creating Docker containers. And maybe some of us started way earlier, because I started somewhere around 3 years ago when Dockers actually came into existence with with Dynamics Nav and Business Central. There's still confusion about how should I create my Docker container. Well, people are still confused about BC container helper or nav container helper, because I see kind of both commands there. So, and I guess Steve have done so many where he kind of recorded those sessions where he was struggling how to do this, how you actually create your Docker container. And I also did once back when nav container helper was a thing. But I guess the confusion is around where should I find that command. And from the time Freddy have written that wizard, I actually don't look for a command, or I don't even apply my brains to think about a command that I need to run, right? Because if I need a Docker, I can just run the wizard and the container will be created. I have hardly any problems using the wizard. So I just want to give this question a little bit time so that if we haven't heard it, let's understand it maybe for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll go back to whatever we were discussing. So the first thing that I'll say, if you have tried in the past and had failures, or your machine had it but you never use it, so you might be using nav container helper in your machine. So the best way to check is come to PowerShell and check, I guess, get installed module. Yeah. So if you do get installed module, it'll tell you which module is installed, and you can click on all versions and then give a name. So if you have a nav container helper, you should be able to find this. Like run this, and I don't have it, so I get an error message. If you find any of nav container helper in your machine, then you should first uninstall those modules, which are nav container helper, which you can do using uninstall module, and then the name and all versions, and it will just remove those. So that's the first step, as in remove if you have any references to nav container helper, because Microsoft have completely discontinued it, and it's just the PowerShell command that's discontinued. The nav images and nav containers can still be created with BC container helper. Then you can install the module, which is BC container helper, using install module, and you can just name it as BC container helper, and it'll install that for you. Anything, Steve, you want to add here? Any checks that you would prefer to do here?
Excuse me. One thing that I see frequently, which I don't really agree with, is you will see a lot of samples on blogs and stuff that says install module BC container helper dash force.
Force, yeah.
And I don't recommend that because that can result in a side-by-side install of multiple versions.
Right.
And PowerShell has a weird, I don't know, understand it, but it will randomly choose a module version. You never know which version it's going to use. So I would
Yes.
make sure to always uninstall your old version and reinstall a new version and not use dash force personally.
Right. That makes sense. So the way I do it is, as in I learned it from one of the Steve's video where he was doing things from task scheduler. So what I've done is I have created this task on my Windows task scheduler, which have two sets of command, right? And it runs at 11 a.m. every day. So I don't have to worry about my BC container helper. That is it old? Is it, is there an update that came and which I don't have? So I have these two commands there, which is uninstall that old version and then install that, right? The new one. So whatever way you prefer, but you need to have the BC container helper to make it easier for creating your containers. It's not mandatory, but Freddy have put good amounts of commands inside this, which will make your life easier with BC containers or nav containers. if you have to create them. So make sure to keep these updated. As Steve said, there should always be one version, and you can always check here using get installed module and then all version, and this time I'll use BC container helper. It'll tell me that I have 2.0.7 BC container helper, so that's safe. If you have multiple with this all version check, you will see the older versions also. So before starting your wizard that I'm going to show in a minute, make sure that you have BC container helper, possibly latest, which you'll get when you install the module. But keep it updating because I guess Freddy keeps on updating and adding things into that module. So that makes life a little bit simpler. So in this question, Sochi wants to attach an existing database while creating a container which is on his own machine. So like the database will reside on my local SQL instance, whereas I want to connect that database to my one of my Docker container that I'm creating. So once I come down here in PowerShell, I can say new BC container wizard, I guess that's what it is. Yes, so it checks your BC container helper version and then it will pop up a new separate console for us, and it's here. So let me bring it here. Now once it loads it, it gives you all the options that you need for creating your container, like which country you are, for which build you want. Is it on-prem or SaaS? Do you need test or not? Where you want to connect your database to. So all those options are here. So I'll not, as Steve said, I'll not rely on any script that I found on internet, and not because it is incorrect, but because it might be an older way of doing it, where things are, keep on changing. So there is a way to kind of handle it using the wizard. So prefer that, so that if things are changing, uh, yes, okay, yeah. So Steve shared his blog in the chat. If you are struggling with your BC container helper and nav container helper update, uh, here is a blog which is available in the chat, which can help you to kind of update that.
And now I realized my title is nav container helper, so I'll have to look to see if I have a newer one. Sorry about that.
No issues. That's what the beauty of change, that nothing can be current, right? So the first one is accept the license. You'll say yes. Then where you want your Docker, is it local Docker or on Azure VM? Let's say Docker container. What kind of authentication you'll prefer? Is it username password, where you want to give your username password or a predefined password? Let's choose B. What you want to call container name, and then there are tips which I'm not going here. Freddie have put good amount of time here, that what Microsoft recommends, how you name your container. They are case sensitive, so try to keep them in single case. So let's say I'll create this one. Then what kind of version you are looking for? Is it latest Business Central Sandbox? Is it on-prem latest version? If you have insider build access, then you can use these two options, C and D. Otherwise, a specific version of Business Central Sandbox build, where you need to have a build version number, or on-prem, or if you want to use a version of 18, 17, or 16 Dynamics Nav. So you can choose whatever you want based on your requirement. So let's choose, let's say, and to this case, Sochi's case, I'm pretty sure you want to choose a specific build, because that build should match to the database that you have on your local SQL. So just make sure that. So let's say latest build of on-prem, and then once that is selected, the wizard is going and identifying what is the latest build, and then you have which country you want. So you can choose any country that you want. Let's say US. Then do you want test toolkit? I'll say no at this point. This is, let me increase the font, AL base app development. I don't want that. This is AL language extension, and this is coming a little bit blur because I have increased the font, but if you use it on your machine, it'll come pretty clear. So I'll say no. The next one is license. You can paste the path where your license is. Otherwise, the wizard will use the Cronus or the standard license. Now, here is Sochi's question, where you want your database to be. Do you want to use the demo database that is inside the container? Do you want to restore a backup inside the container and make sure that the correct version, and then connect to an existing database on a database server? And I guess this is what is being asked on the question. So let's choose C and see what option system gives us. So system is saying, I need the containers connection string in following format. Either give me server or data source. Let's say server, my server name, and if there is an instance name, then either the database name or the initial catalog where your database name pops up, then your user ID and password. It also says that you can use dot or localhost if you have it on your local machine, the host machine. And the connection string cannot use integrated security, which means you cannot use Windows authentication. You'll have to kind of use a username password. So you can kind of say like this: server is equals to dot, which means localhost. Then I need my database. So my database or my local would be something like demo database. It's still called NAV. Okay. And then a user ID. Let's use the same format. And let's say this is my user ID. And then my password is, let's put a random password here. Okay. Let's assume this is my SQL password. So this user, which I'm using here, should have access to this database on SQL as DBO so that the connection can be built up, right? Once you have done this, click enter, system will check your string, and then other options will pop up like, do you need a domain name server? You can choose yes. Do you need a SSL certificate? I don't. Do you need an isolation? I'll let Docker container decide it. How much memory you need? You need to append that with G. So let's say 4G. You want to save the image if you don't have it, and I don't want at this point. So this is your script that you need to create this container. So the name that you have given for your container, the default password, and then a username, password, and then artifact. It also got that artifact URL based on type prem, on-prem, country US, and latest. The database is hosted on localhost, so that's how the command or wizard translated for you. There is no database instance, and the database name is this, username is this, and password is this. Then it uses its own conversion to convert that into a plain text, and then this is your command to create that. And now you can also save it. So I can say like test.ps1, and as soon as I say that, that wizard will close and my PowerShell will open with the same command. Now I don't prefer saving this, but you can if you want, if you have to run the same command every time. But that's how you will have to create your command, Soji, rather than taking it from internet. And I'm not saying, again, I'm repeating, I'm not saying that the command on the internet is incorrect. What I'm saying is that post would have got older because of changes in the Docker and container helpers. So use this way, the wizard way, so that it makes your command the way it should be, rather than picking a script from any blog, either from my blog or any other blog. Because I'm pretty sure the script that I would have is year old now, because I don't now keep on writing those scripts, because that doesn't make any sense. Any questions, anybody, before we move ahead? Okay, so give it a try, Sauchi, and we'll if you have a question, drop us, and we'll see next week that question again. Otherwise, okay. So, sorry. Coming back to where we left last week, is we were trying to import an Excel file in Business Central, and let me open my clone repo, which is this. Yeah. And those people who are not there last week, what we have done is, we have, just to make it easy to understand, we have just created a sample table, a staging table, where we want to hold the record that are coming from that Excel file, and that has some specific field like status. If there is an error message, we'll see how we'll use it, and then the primary keys entry number, just to make it simple for importing. And then in this table, there is a function which gets the primary key on insert. So it gets the last entry number, and then returns you the next entry number based on it. And then we have a page which is showing all the data that can be used to import. And then we also tested the sheet selection using this action. So we are doing all this into this code unit, which is import to staging. We created one function last week where we were trying to read it, select the file from the user. If we get the file, then we selected the sheet. So that's where we left last week. So now, once we have the sheet name, and when we have the stream where the Excel file and details are stored, now we can actually go ahead and start importing, reading that Excel file. So as we talked about last week, we created this temporary variable, and make sure it's temporary. I have seen in Dynamics Snap, people don't create it temporary. Other people who are writing that code or using the same buffer table may get into problem, because you have data stored there, which is actually not required, because it's just holding that data into this table before we actually import into our staging or actual table. So once we have the sheet name, we can actually, using this, I'll just make sure that if there's nothing, we'll delete all the records if there are any, and then we can actually open book. Now this is what developers in Dynamics Nav were using, which is open book, file name, and sheet name. But this is something which is not allowed in Business Central, at least SaaS, right? You can still use it for on-prem if you tag it as on-prem into your extension. But at the same time, Microsoft have added a function or method, open book stream, which accepts a file stream and a sheet name. So I have both my in stream and as well as my sheet name. So I'll use this, and I'll do my Excel in stream and sheet name. So with this, what will happen is, this function will open the sheet and the file and that particular sheet which we have selected, and then you can actually read the sheet, which we have done like this, which we can do like read sheet. Once you do read sheet, what happens is, this table, temp Excel buffer or Excel buffer, eventually gets data into it. So let's first have a look. I'll just publish this, and then we'll have a look about the designer. We can see the design here also, right? So let's do that. So if you haven't seen this, the way this table is designed is, there is a row number, a column number, which is, I guess, still the primary key. Let me see. Okay. So the row number and the column number is a primary key. So each column in your Excel is kind of identified, and then the value that is there is stored in one of the column. And let me see, there is something on the chat, I guess. Okay, I don't see anything, but okay, there was a thing. Okay, so what you can see is here is that value on cell value as text. So anything that you import from Excel will always be stored as text into this table with a reference of your row number and the column number. So with this line of code, the Excel file and the sheet that you have selected, that will kind of get imported into this Excel buffer table. So now let's come back on the top and see what we said last week is the next I always do is to find the last row and the column number, because your Excel can have 1,000 rows, but you might have eliminated the data into from last 30 rows. So when system reads it, it reads it based on how much is there data into that column or not. So to find the end of my sheet, or to loop it through in my Excel buffer, I need to know how many rows and columns are there into my Excel sheet that just got imported. So let's create a procedure to kind of count those max number of rows and max number of columns into it. And I'll just add two variables here to find the max number of rows and columns. Okay? And we'll set them in this procedure. So what we are going to do here is I'm going to do my, so if I do a kind of identification on my row number one, what will happen is if there are 5 columns, there will be 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and 1, 5 entries in that table for each column. So I can actually find any row. You can take any number, but I'm pretty sure the first row, if it is there, then I'll know the number. So I can do that if I find the last record by using this range, then whatever the column number is in the last uh, record with this filter will be my maximum number of columns, because normally my first row in my Excel will be headers that I have, right? So I can get my column number. So this will tell me that this is the maximum column. And we can then again do a reset and then just find the last record into this. And whatever the row number is there, that becomes my maximum row. So if there are 1,000 row, the last record that I find, whatever the row number in that will become my maximum row number. So with this, I know how many rows and how many columns I have in my Excel file that I'm trying to read now, because that's the next step that we are going to do, is going to import that into my staging. So now what I want to do is import that into my staging. So let's create a variable of my staging, which is customer staging. And then I can just simply do my, and I create, I can do my customer staging. I need an insert because there is nothing on that. There are no validation on that table. It's just a staging table to hold that data before I actually process it. But as we learned earlier, anything that is read from an Excel is always stored as a text, and while we are trying to import that into a table record, the system will require a validation on whatever the field uh, data type that you have. So I cannot pass a text into an integer or on an option or on a date time, right? And that's where our old friend called evaluate comes into picture. So evaluate, if you see the parameters of it, let's have a look. You need to have a variable where it need to be the value need to be stored, and then the string which you want to translate into that variable. And if the evaluate successfully happens, then the variable will get that value converted. So it does that assignment to that particular data type that we are trying to use. So what I'm trying to use first is my custom and staging dot, let's say the first is what type. Okay, and then I need a value at my, so if let's open an Excel. So what I'm will be trying to import is something like this, right? I just picked your names from the sheet, but the type will be my first column, name, phone number, and posting group. Those are my fields. So what I'm trying to get into at this point on the evaluate is this number one. Now that system will find at A2, where the row number is 2, where the column number is A. So I need to get that value, which is of type text. So rather than kind of doing a set range every time, let's create a function of get cell value on a particular row. I don't have row number, and the row will be changing. So what I can do is I can create a row number, and then my column position will be fixed for this, which is 1, because I know in my sheet the value type is always in column 1. So always get whatever the row number is running, the value at that. So let's create that function here, procedure here, which is row number and column number. Now this function returns the text. So what I can do here is I can do my get of my row number and my column number, and then I want to exit whatever the value that's there, right? So temp excel buffer with cell value as text. So I know this value is always stored as text. And then if it doesn't find anything, then I make sure that I pass empty. So what this function will do is with the row number and column number, because as we saw, the primary key of this is row number and column number. So it will return that data into that, and then evaluate will convert that into the specific type of the data type of that field. Let's quickly do similar things for other 5 fields that we have. Okay, okay. Okay, here. Okay. So this becomes my name, and then this becomes my phone number, and the last column in my Excel is my posting group. All right. So this will give us what we wanted into my staging. But then this will right now is running for one record, which is row number is kind of set to 1. But then if I look at my Excel, my row number 1 is only containing my headers of that table. So I actually want to start from 2 till the end of this, right? So then I can loop it around here, that for my row number from beginning from 2 to maximum number of rows that I have, where I store that. Oh, this is this max row number. So I can just loop it through 2 till that max row number is reached, and keep doing this. What will happen is it'll read this file and kind of uh, row by row and import that data into staging with this. We need to make sure this is true because that's where my entry number validation or initialization is, which is on the on insert trigger. So it sets that. So let's quickly publish this. Let's have a look on while we try to read that file what happens. Okay. Okay, so I'll pop this up here. Okay, so now our utility should be able to read that Excel file directly into my staging with whatever we are writing here. So let's have a look on that. So now once it is written, we can start pushing that value to wherever we want. Like in this case, what we have done is in the Excel, we have this type 1, which is a unique identifier that it is of type customer, and then type 2 is kind of a unique identifier for vendor. And just for demo, I have put it on two different sheets. You can eventually put it in one single sheet. That's not a problem. So when I do import Excel, this is our stream dialog. So once I choose that, I can pick the sample. It shows me all the sheets that they have, which is customer, vendor, and sheet 3. So I'll just close it. So there are no problems. I'll just read customer, and that data is here. Now I'll again read that, but this time, just to make sure that my sheet logic is working, I'll use the other sheet, which is the vendor, and that data is also here. So now the data is into the staging. And now what we have to do is to kind of bring it to the actual record based on whatever the type is. If the type is 1, then it goes to your customer table. If a type is 2, then it goes to your vendor table. Now, the idea behind creating the staging table always when you are bringing data from your Excel sheet is that uh, you don't want to get stuck with all the validation that are happening while your record is being pulled from an Excel file. And you just want to make sure that whatever you're trying to import is the correct data. So you always kind of punch that data into a staging environment. And from there, you can write your logic howsoever you want to put it. We have done this staging scenarios where you want to import, let's say, items with their attributes and with their dimensions, as in a flat file to import into an item. You can use rapid start, but if you have complex situation where the data that is coming from Excel will actually go into 5 different tables, then you want to have that logic written, and that's where staging becomes important, where you kind of put that data in an without validated environment, and then from there you start processing it. So what we'll do is, for processing, for right now, we'll create a new code unit. Okay. Now this code unit will process this data into my actual tables. Now, most of the time, you'll find while you're processing these records, there might be some input errors, there might be some wrong data. And wherever I have seen this being used is, people want to run it behind the scene while it is running on your job queue. It picks whatever the record that have came through and then try to create records into it. So you also want to make sure that while you're creating your records from staging to actual table, there are no errors. And if there are errors, then they are handled in a way that your job queue doesn't break, right? So let's create a procedure and we'll make it global so that we can call it from page. It's process staging records. we have two kind of records. So what we'll do is then we will do a my process customer records, and then let's say, and we'll create that later. Let's first understand this. Others I can other functions I can kind of copy paste from customer. So now what we want to do is we want to process any record that is into the staging table, which is of type 1, which should end up for being in customer, right? So then what we want is my customer and staging, the record where the table where the data resides, and then the target table where I want to store that. Alright. Now, because my staging contain multiple types of record, I want to make sure that I filter out my records, which is of type 1. And then I have this status field. So I only want to process anything that is within status not processed, or rather than which is either an error, because if it's an error, user can change it on that page. Either it's an error or it's a new record, which will be the status of a new record that is imported into it. So I now get all the staging record that came from the Excel. So with this, if I don't find anything, I always want to do false positive here every time. Then I don't want to waste time, and I want to go out, because if there are no records with this filter set, then there's no point of staying here and go out. But if there are any and the function didn't exited, then I can loop it through all the records that I'm finding here and start importing them into customer, right? So I can kind of do something like this, which is need my customer dot, what is this name, as or at the max, let's say validate my name with whatever is on my customer vending stage dot name, and then at the end, whatever that value is at the end, insert my record into this. We need to remember at this point is because the data is coming from an external source, which in this case is an Excel, we can't be sure about the data that is coming from Excel is always correct. And anytime which I do a assignment or invalidate, system will look for the validation that are defined in the system on customer table. And if there are any errors, they will kind of break your job queue or will cause pause into a process if you're manually running it. And surprisingly, that brings us to the next question that we had last week, which is the try methods. So if you haven't used this was there in Dynamics Nav. I don't know if I don't exactly remember when it was introduced, but it was there for a while, and Microsoft uses it in your posting routines, and there are some specific characteristics of a try function. So it's not a try catch situation like you had in other programming languages like Java and all, but it can help you to either suppress an error if you are in a situation like where we are, or give meaningful error to customer rather than giving the value in this field on the on customer posting group is not found in XYZ table. So the important thing about the try methods is that they cannot do a write transaction. That means you cannot do an insert or a modify in the database while you are in these functions in try methods. And by default, you don't have to kind of state it separately, every try method always returns a Boolean value, which means that whatever the code is written inside a try function, did it give an error at any point? And if not, then it'll return true, otherwise it'll return a false. And then you can, handle things the way you want. But there is a unique thing which I found out while I was using it once, is that if you don't consume the written value, which is if you don't kind of put it into a if else loop, then errors will be exposed as usual, as they will do without a try function. So then a try method become a local method as a normal procedure. So make sure when you are using the try methods, you always consume the value which is written. You don't have to separately define a written variable. It is inbuilt in the try methods. And make sure that you never do a write transaction, because that will always end up into an error message, because you can't do that. So where do we use it? As in, you can see base application, base code. Microsoft has used it so many places. But then in this situation where we are right now, we can actually use it because we know that if there is, let's say, if there is something which is more than 100 characters in this name, as in which will not be because it's 100. But let's take an example. If I have this, right, we have this field, validate. Yes, we have my posting group and posting group. Now with this validate statement, system will always check that whatever the posting group that you're trying to bring from the Excel to staging and then staging to customer should always exist into the customer posting group table. And if not, then it'll return you an error message that the validation of customer posting group failed because this value is not found. So we want to handle the situation. So what we can actually do is we can create a function, let's say try create customer, and we can pass our both the variables there, which is my source table and my target table. And as I said, we have to consume it, the return type of this. So I'll always start it with the true or with the if, and then we'll decide what we want to do inside this later. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a procedure, but not using the ALZ because it will create it as a, saying of let's create it. So if you use a snippet like this, make sure to remove the return type, because a try method will always return by default. And then you just have to define it as a try function. Now this statement makes sure that anything that comes as an error doesn't actually appear to user on his or her screen. And what we will try to do inside this is we will try to do all this here in validate, not insert, because I can't do a write transaction inside that. Okay, so I'll do my init, I'll do my name, and then I'll also do, there was one more field I guess, which is phone number. First one is staging dot phone number. Let's see what else fields are there, which is entry number, type we have handled, name, phone number, posting group. Yeah, and you can have a number of fields if you want. Now because we want this to be validated, so and then this value to be returned, so I'll define it as a var, and I'll make sure that because there are multiple records that will visit this function, so I want to make sure that it is cleared before this happens. So now what will happen is either it will return a true or a false. If everything inside this happens successfully, there is no error in the validate of any of these fields, then it'll return us true, otherwise it'll return us false. So if it returns us true, then now what I want to do is, because I have passed it as reference, I can always insert that record. So all my calling or my validate are happening here, and I'm just calling my database write transaction into the normal function. So with this, I don't violate whatever try function can do, and I don't get all these messages which are happening here. But if it inserts correctly, I want to update my staging table, right? And if it is not created successfully, still I want to update my staging table. So what I'll do, and I see some questions, so I'll take it once this function is completed. What I'll do is we'll create a function called update status, and we'll pass our staging record so that we know which record to update. And then we'll pass, if it is a success, we'll pass blank, and then we'll pass, let's say, customer dot number, which is whatever the customer is created. Let's create this, and I don't like to change that record in my repeat until. So what I prefer doing all the time is try creating a temp and then update that main table later. So I'll say temp cast when staging record. Yeah, anybody, anything? Somebody's trying to say
Saurabh,
something. Yeah.
Saurabh, how did you create this function? Which shortcut you have used to create this function automatically?
Oh, so this is an extension from ALAZ. So whenever you define something, let's say test ABC, and you end it with the curly braces, this ALAZ extension will always show you here on the right hand side. I don't know why it is not showing right now. See, will show you a light bulb here, which you can
Yeah.
click, and then it gives you an option. And it's so smart that you can also say that on before. So if you say on before update status, it understands that you're using a keyword on before, and that can be a event subscriber. So if you click on this, it'll give you all three options:
Hmm.
add local variable, global variable, or because I haven't used curly braces, so that's why it's suggesting it as a variable. But if I give
Hmm.
it curly braces, now it understands that it should be a procedure, right?
Okay.
And then it just creates a empty procedure of that named procedure that you want. So don't install it. Let me show you here. Where is that extension management? I guess this is, if I'm not wrong, it's ALAZ. Yeah, ALAZ code outline. And this helps you in so many ways. Creating a page with a wizard, creating a tables with a wizard. So there are so many things into this. So have a look. If there are questions, we can surely take it later time.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what I prefer to do, what I was saying is, instead of actually updating it into the record because that loop is going on, I would prefer this to store onto a temp table, and then at the end, I'll pass it to the actual table. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to initialize this, which is a temp, and then doing an insert, right? Okay. And then using my transfer field, I'll just transfer whatever is in there. In the end, what I want two things is if I get an error message here on my last error, and we'll see how we pass that. If my last error is not blank, that means there is an error in my try function. In that case, I want to set my status to error. And then I also want my message or error to show whatever is in the last error. But if it is not the case, if it is successfully created, if the customer is successfully created, then I want to make sure that my status is set to processed. And my message and error this time have my master number, which will be either the customer or the vendor number. What will happen with this is this temp record will get populated anytime that uh, try function returns, and if it fails, then what we'll do is we will just update the status of that same staging record. But this time, instead of having it blank, we'll pass our get last error message text. So the last error message text returns you whatever the last error message that has been seen. But because this is an unlimited size text string, we want to make sure that we do this with a copy star, right? So that if it is more than the length of this field, then it kind of truncate whatever is more than the length of it. So with this way, either it's an error message or in success, my staging record will get updated, and I'll be able to move forward without breaking. If you're using it from job queue, your job queue will not break. So once all my customer records are updated, I want to make sure that I do update my staging actual status, right? Because we did change that on my temporary variable that we have created. So let's quickly add this, and then I can do that if I don't find anything on my temp customer vendor staging, then I don't need it to do anything. I can just go out. Otherwise, get that record which is on my temp vendor staging.entry number, and then just update those two fields which I am passing there, which is the status and the message and error. Okay, so this will actually pass that value there, and my staging will get updated. Okay. So with this, at the end of it, my staging records will be updated, whatever happened to them, either it was a success or a failure. So we'll be able to see that. But let's take a pause. Let's see some questions, and then we'll test this out. And to share the staging code to project. Okay, I have 3 questions. Okay, Sachin, are you going to share this staging code? Yes, Sachin, this will be available on GitHub. Steve, can AL detect file locks on XLS file? I guess yes, Steve. If you are using that file, it does warn you, as in it does error out that the file is not locked. And you can even lock it if it is not logged from the code.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing I've had to do in .NET is users will accidentally have the file open for reading or editing, and they'll try to import. So I've had to have .NET code to specifically check for that. It's a common occurrence for me.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, it wants that. Can you only read the Excel column using ordinal 1, 2, 3, or you can use column name based on? So the way, Steve, that table is designed, the Excel buffer, right, where we are putting that
Yep.
data into the staging, is
Yep.
actually based on numbers.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
the way that
Usually the file format is consistent, but occasionally I'll have a customer who will swap columns for whatever reason, and the columns will be in a different order. So I've since switched to being able, like in .NET, I can read the column header values. Normally
and
it's
you
not an
can,
issue.
because if
Okay,
if you see
you
we
just read the
started from
first
row
row.
number 2, yeah, just
Yeah,
read the
yeah.
first row and then you can switch the way you want,
Okay,
right? Yeah.
okay, got it.
And then Can the staging table be a setup type temporary? Will that improve the performance? Yes or no, because there are different situations. Like from staging, a record can actually be an actual record, right? Or it
Okay.
can fail the way we are trying to handle it at this point, right? Maybe like in the example that we will be seeing in a while. Let me see if I have my this open. There are some record that we imported from Excel which actually does not exist. There are some master which are missing. So in that case, the staging will need to hold those records which failed. Right. So the posting
Ah,
group international actually does not exist in the system, and this is a user error. This is not system error, but this is a
right.
user error where he thought that they have a posting group.
Okay.
With the temporary table, the problem is it'll go out of memory as soon as you execute that session or close that session, right?
Got it. So by putting it in a physical temporary or staging table, it allows you to persist and display it after the import runs and say, hey, here are the 10 errors
Yeah,
you had. Okay,
right.
got
You
it.
know,
Okay, cool. And then that also facilitates a re-import of the errors in case they fix the problem.
yeah. So that's
Nice.
why we have done this.
Okay,
That we have filtered two types of record, which is either they are of status error or status new,
nice. Got it.
right?
Okay, makes sense.
So in this sheet right now, everything is new. But when we try
Got
to
it.
process, either it will be converted to processed or an error,
Makes total sense.
right? And then your fourth question was, what is your recommendation on detecting, handling, notifying the user about data issues in Excel? Stage, well, that's missing column or a column that is different order. Yeah, so the normally how people tend to do it is based on this table. They may schedule an emails that okay at the
Okay.
end of the day. So normally what people do is they'll import throughout the day. In the night, a job queue will run, which will try to process these record. And at the end of it, whatever is in the error stage will be kind of sent as a attachment or either in the email body that these record failed.
Well, at the actual code level, do you typically put handling and validation as you're taking that Excel buffer and putting in the staging and detect errors there? Or do you
No,
typically detect errors after the data is in staging?
after in the staging, because the whole concept of being on staging is so that you don't have to do complex validations and all,
Got
because
it. Okay.
otherwise I could have actually inserted into the customer directly, right? So
So
the idea is
if,
that Excel can be read faster.
okay, so if instead of, say, a postal code, that column had an address of value, where would you
Right.
detect that mismatch?
During the process, so this try function will catch that as an error, right?
When loading into staging or when
No,
customer validates?
while the customer validate is
Okay,
happening on
got it.
this try create, right?
Okay, so
And
everything
then
made it successfully in the staging more or
staging,
less, and
yeah.
it's only once you try to move to the second step that the error is exposed.
Yeah, because then we
Okay,
can, user can take that action saying that, oh, I did a mistake while trying to import this. It should have
got
been
it.
this value, right?
Okay, okay. This is very different than what I normally do, so it's interesting
Okay.
to see. Cool.
Because I
And
see
so,
your hand raised. Yeah.
yes, sort of, I have means one question and one comment.
Go
So,
ahead.
firstly, means as you shown that upload Excel. So, means is there any possibility that we can skip the dialog box? Like means if we want, we have some folder from that folder, the some job queues starts. Means I just want to automate these things.
Yeah, on
So,
prem you can still do it. You might have to create some
but
customs, but you can.
not in the cloud
In
ones
the
as well.
online model, I'll have to check, but the only thing that even if it is possible, the only way it will be possible is if you put your file either on SharePoint or something which is online,
Yes, yeah,
right?
SharePoint or the what we say the OneDrive. I can from OneDrive we can do. I
OneDrive,
did.
you need to have an authentication mechanism, right? That
For
you
that, OA authentication we can, I think.
okay, yeah, then you can use
So,
that. If
but the only question, because I tried, but I did not found any solution for that to remove that dialog box. So I was wondering that if you have any way out for that. So, and next point was that that you mentioned for the try function, that for the
right.
we cannot use for write transaction neither for the insert nor for modify. So I wanted to maybe I know, but I used they were introduced in NAV 16 onwards. So I used I think they cannot be used for insert transaction, but they can be used for modify, because I used some XML like the staging course, XML JSON read. So I
Okay.
was trying to insert, create the new record, the way you are showing the example. So insert transaction could not be able. So I just use code new dot run to insert, but for modification updation, I could use the try catch for the modify.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to test that out. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Vijay, you have something?
In the SAS version, can we use FTP to import file directly?
Uh, I have tried it, but I didn't had success. So I might not be the right person, but I'll have to try it out. The only thing that I've
Actually, in
heard
the
is,
cloud version, sorry, Sachin here.
yeah, yes,
Actually, on the
Sachin.
cloud version, we don't have the file directory access, so that's the hurdle. For the on-premise version, we can do that.
Right. That I guess that's what my understanding was also, that you can only do
Okay.
it on a online, a file which have a URL,
Oh, wow. That's a
right?
pretty
Because
big deal.
yeah,
Hmm.
because let's understand
Yep.
it, and
Yep.
people, as in I talk to customer and they also have this complaint, but we need to understand that it's not a uh, change how Microsoft build the software. It's
Yep.
actually where the client is hosted. So the client is a browser client.
Yep.
You can go to Facebook, Twitter, anywhere. When you say download a file, it always goes to your download folder, irrespective of wherever you are, on your mobile device, on your tablet, or on your on your PC. And the same will happen when I do a save report as or download a file from my web client. So it's not a NAB or a business central thing. It's just the way browser treats imports and exports of file, right?
Got it. Yeah, correct. Hmm.
And the same kind of applies when you try to add links into your record. They also need to be URL because you want user to click on it. So like if you are, let's say, on let's go somewhere, customers. If you are in a customer and you are trying to access that fact box where you can have your record links, which in the past was a big deal to, or a very important thing to have, which is here. You can have these links, but when you click on this link, it actually needs an address, which should be a web address. I can't just say that d drive test.al, because the browser cannot find this drive, right? It cannot go to that link address. But if I'll say to a website, it will always go there. So that's the reason your SharePoint or your OneDrive becomes necessary, because that's where they kind of store that info, right? Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll come back here.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to add an action in this page so that we can test this. So let me see if I have an action created for this. Okay. ABC action. No, I don't have. Okay, so let's create an action. I thought I had one. So what we want to do is we want to create an action to kind of process whatever is in the staging. So let's create a T action, which is process staging. And in this, I'll just copy these and then I'll change these values. This is process staging records, and then let's change the image to process. Okay, and then let's set it to promoted to true, and promoted is big to true, and promoted category to, let's say, process. And I'll update that here also. I forgot to do that last time. Okay. And on this, I want to have a variable of my process records, my code unit, process staging, and then my from my process staging, I want to run my process staging records. And then at the end, let's put a message, records processed. So now let's test it out, how this actually works, or are there any errors on this? Okay, here it is. I don't know why it goes to another window all the time. Okay, so now we have it here, process records. Right now we are only trying to update anything which is of type 1, and I think we have only domestic as a posting group. So let's quickly check that. If I do a customer posting group, there is only one which is domestic. So that means other than record number 1 and record number 4, entry number 4, I should get errors for the middle 2. So when I do my process records, I'll actually gone and completed it. Okay, I should put an update, but let's refresh this. Oh, it only processed 1. What code we have written? Let's see. Maybe we forgot to loop it. Oh, I did loop it. Okay, and it created the first customer. In this case, it should get an error message and update that status. Okay, type 1, new on staging, and then until the next is empty. States that, let's go here. I did this initialize of this temp, transfer that, assign that. And the first one actually worked. So it didn't move the other ones. Let's see. Okay, so this is my customer. Let's quickly have a look on this. Okay, customers. Oh, it created 2. I guess there is some problem in our update status logic. It did create others, but it didn't. It's not showing that. But we see Steve there and Tanya there. So let's pop that up, and we can see the phone number is inserted, and our customer posting group is set to domestic. And same for the other user, Tanya, which is now converted to a customer. So let's delete these 2 records and let's see what we did wrong in our code. And then you also will have to do things like manage a situation where duplicates are not inserted. I'm not going into those details, but they all are just piece of code that you can write, right? Okay, so let's come back here. Let's see what happened. So it did execute the first one. This function called stage update is called. In the second one, it did call this. It failed. That successfully happened. That it did fail. but it didn't updated this. Okay, it should have done that. Okay, I'll actually have to debug this at this point. Anybody can see anything on top of their head, which I cannot see? Okay, looks okay to me, but let's see.
Do we need to clear the last error?
No, that always gets the latest one, and surprisingly, there is not even a single error on the things that got imported, right?
Okay.
So that's the worry I have. Okay, so let's see. Let's this time debug. Okay. So I did process records. I got here. The customer is the record that is trying to process is record number 2 because the first one is already processed and the second name is this and all these details are this. I'll not get into details. I'll just step over it, and there is for sure a problem in this. It got to this point, which means the try failed. So let's go in. It went inside here. It did transfer that, which is it? Yeah, 2. The last error is that the field customer posting group in the table this contained this, which cannot be found on the customer posting group, which makes sense. It did update it here and then inserted it. Okay. So that means my last function is not doing a repeat until kind of thing. I think I know where the problem is. So let's quickly go there. Okay. So I guess the problem is here where I forgot to do a repeat until. Okay. My bad. Okay. I should have done here, or it would have updated right now the second record, right? In this case, the record actually failed and the error is here. And I didn't get it at a client level. I just stored it into the staging table, which is the field customer posting group of table this contain a value international, which cannot be found into the record. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and delete this customer, which would have been created for the last user. Yes, successfully. And we will correct this code so that it all runs in one go. And let's edit this. And this is an error. So we'll just clear the error and we'll see what happens. Okay. So where I did a mistake is not a mistake, yeah, or a mistake which I forgot is here. This is still have records. It should kind of keep on doing this. So I'll update all the records. Okay. So, okay, that should be the last piece on this. So let's run this. And this record process, out of which the second one has this problem of the customer posting group table has this record, and the same for here. And then, you can always go back to your customer, refresh that, and you will see whatever the correct ones they are created, which is Tanya in this case, because I deleted Steve user, which was already processed, so it didn't took this into account. But then what happens is user comes here and say, oh, I did a mistake while I was importing this data. So let me change this to domestic. Copy it here and do this. Paste this here. Okay.
That is a fantastic feature right there that you just showed. I can't tell you how many years I've wanted that in the Dynamics GP world, but it was just way too much effort to develop it. Wow, very nice.
So yeah, then once you fix whatever the mistakes you have done, you can again process your records, and whatever was corrected will be created. If there is another message, you can only see it here. So with this, what you can achieve is you don't have to kind of stuck on your job queue that it stopped because there was an error message while I was trying to process this record, or your job queue doesn't die at the same time, as in we are already running out of time. But anytime you create these kind of staging table, make sure to kind of purge them timely, as in define a time period when you want these process record to be go away. And if I remember it correctly, there is a built-in functionality for this, which is now I forgot about it. Okay, there was I guess it's on the change log also. Just quickly see, you can set up I completely forgot about it. What was that functionality is called? Retention policy. Yeah. Whenever you have a staging table, make sure to set a retention policy. As on SaaS, we don't want to kind of keep the junk data that that will be of no use for customers. So if they think that this all looks good, but anything that is processed should be automatically deleted after 1 month. So you can always create a new retention policy with the table number. So our table number that we have, let me just quickly check that, is 70,000. So I can come here and say, okay, on 70,000, make sure, okay, not listed in allowed table. Okay, so there is a catch. Oh, there is a subscriber that we'll have to take. But eventually what happens on this table, and maybe this is something we can discuss next week, is you can define that after this period, let's say after 1 month, okay, after this particular period, these records should be deleted, and then there is a way to filter out which records you want to delete. Yeah. So you can set a filter that, okay, if the date, time, send, whatever the field that you have in your table, if this was created a month before, if this was created 2 months before. So whatever your logic is, you can set that up into retention policies, and then use that retention policy to make sure that this table data get removed after a defined period of time. So is retention policy sounds good to talk about next week? I can surely do a little bit research because I actually want to learn this, that how you include custom tables into it. Well, that'll be important for us going forward. But yeah, that's what I'll do with the staging table. Make sure that the data gets removed at a specific defined time period. Otherwise, these logs always get so big that they take most of your customer database space. Okay, sorry, I guess I didn't notice the time, but we are way above than the time. But if there are any question, I'll stay. Okay.
Thank you. Awesome session.
Thanks.
Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you, Saurabh.
So,
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
thank you for the great session. Thank you. Bye.
No problems. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.